We'll wait just a second for our social media feed to commence. So we asked you to be here at 2 o'clock, and we're a couple of minutes early, so I don't want to put anybody in a pickle if we start a couple of minutes early. So if you're okay, we'll go ahead and start our conversation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come join us here at the City of Norman. Over the past several weeks, we've been receiving numerous phone calls asking questions, seeking clarification regarding comments people have seen in social media in a couple of primary areas. One related to our budget for the current fiscal year, which began July 1. So with us, I brought our finance director, controller, and city treasurer, Mr. Anthony Francisco. And the other vein of questions circled around the City of Norman's police department and their willingness and/or ability to respond to calls for service. So we are here to clarify all of those issues, hopefully in one big pass with your assistance, so we greatly appreciate it. So to talk to some budget issues specifically, I would like to introduce to you our finance director, controller, and treasurer, Mr. Anthony Francisco. Anthony.
Thank you, Daryl. I'm Anthony Francisco, the city's finance director. I was asked to talk about the specific changes that were made to the city manager's proposed budget before it was finally adopted by the city council. The city council made 3 specific amendments to the city manager's proposed budget that related to the police department. And then there was a 4th amendment that was citywide, and we'll discuss the impact to the police department of that amendment as well. There were 2 amendments that specified reductions to the salary and benefit category of expenditure, and one that was not specific to the category. One amendment reduced the police department budget by $235,000 for the implementation of an internal audit function for the city. One was $300,000 for a community outreach program, and one was for $330,321 additionally to that community outreach program. The way that is implemented is that the police department budget was reduced and the general fund budget of the city's proposed budget was reduced by that combined $630,321 and was placed into a reserve of the general fund balance that council can appropriate during the course of the fiscal year for those community outreach programs. There is a mayoral appointed task force that is examining how those funds might be used, and there's also the council's oversight committee that is exploring how those funds might be used. To implement that total of $865,321 budget reduction in the police department that was specified to be taken from the salary and benefit category, there was a reduction of 2 police officer positions, 3 master police officer positions, and 2 sergeant positions. All of those things taken together, the fiscal year 2021 budget for the city police department combined from the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund is $31,153,807 as compared to the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget of $30,853,783. So all of those things taken into account, the police department combined budget was increased from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021 by $300,024. There has been some, in my opinion, misleading information put out that compared the combined 2019-2020 budget to the 2019-2020 revised budget. And so I was asked to explain what is in the adopted budget versus what is in the revised budget that is presented in the budget documents. Basically, as the fiscal year progresses, the council can make mid-year appropriations to the budget, and there are also carryover encumbrances from the prior fiscal year that is added to those budgets. So it's really an apples and oranges comparison to compare that revised figure that's really an estimate of where we think we will end the fiscal year to the actual adopted budget. You should really compare budget to budget, and that's what we have done with the $300,000 figure. During the course of the year, the council has the flexibility to make changes to the budget, as does the city manager within funds. And this year in particular, there will probably be a need for that because all of our projections for revenues on the sales tax side, expenditures related to everything that we do in the city is very tentative at this point because of the effects of the COVID pandemic and what we may or may not be forced to do to adjust our budgets related to our expenditures and our revenues as they relate to that pandemic. So yes, there is flexibility. That's why we maintain fund balances. That's why all of the departments try to work within their budgets as prudently as they can. And there will be the need for that more so this fiscal year than any fiscal year in the past. With that, I'll turn it over to Chief Kevin Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Francisco. As you may recognize, the budget is a very complex system, so that if you do have questions for Mr. Francisco, they may be followed by Mr. Francisco asking you some clarifying questions so we can answer when appropriately with oranges to oranges as opposed to an apples to orange kind of a scenario that may provide misleading information. I'd next like to introduce our police chief, Chief Kevin Foster, to address some comments and concerns we've been seeing in social media about our capabilities, our ability to respond, our willingness to respond to calls for service, as well as even a rumor that the chief has been precluded or directed not to be able to run our next police academy to fill vacancies as needed. So, Chief Foster.
Hello. Thank you all for coming. The first thing I'd like to address is just the ability to respond to calls. We still have the ability to respond to calls, and we hope that it is not affecting our response times. And if it is, it's most likely affecting those that are non-emergency calls. If it ever gets to the point to where we couldn't respond or wasn't responding in a timely manner, I would pull back other positions back into patrol and cut other services. We will always respond. We will always have the people to take the calls when you call and dispatch, and the officers to respond on the street. The other thing is on the academy. We are looking at having an academy next March. We should be opening up that process soon for the hiring process. I've asked for approval for a dozen because we're several down from the 171 right now, and I anticipate being down more by the time the spring comes around. So I look forward to opening that up soon, and anybody that's looking to become a police officer, I think this is a great place to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. We always remind our community that if you are in need of police services in an emergency situation, please dial 911. You will receive a professional response. If it's a non-emergency situation, we also have a non-emergency number, and that just helps us prioritize those calls for service. At this point, we would be happy to answer any questions you may have about the current budget situation or our current staffing levels and responses with the police department. Happy to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Mindy Wood, Norman Transcript. How will the department pay for the academy in March?
The spots that we will be filling will be spots that were below on the 171. the cuts that we took on the budget, when it took us from 180 down to 171 authorized, right now we're about at 165, 164. So we have ability in the budget to put those positions back. They're already budgeted for.
Were you unable to have a police academy this year though because of the budget cut?
We hadn't planned on having an academy this year due to a hiring freeze and being unsure about what was going to happen, reference some lawsuits on the TIF and the different things for the city's budget being affected. So we was sort of on hold until we started the process. Once that was finalized, we definitely started looking at having an academy. The budget cuts did cut the numbers, but we will still have an academy and try to bring us up to the staffing level that we're at now in March. Still, the academy will run 26, 27 weeks and 14 weeks of field training after that. So it'll take a while to get those guys on the streets. So hopefully we can get plenty hired, make up for the numbers that we anticipate leaving after that.
Do you expect response time to be any different now that you have some officers who have either resigned or retired since the vote last month?
No, and we will watch our response times, particularly to emergency calls. And if, like I was saying earlier, if they get to a point to where it is affecting our response times to emergency calls to a large extent, we will pull people back from other areas. Out of our COP office that does a lot of the community outreach and things, we will pull them back to patrol so we can have the staffing levels at the level that will allow us to respond to those calls in a timely manner.
How many officers have you guys had retired since that vote been turned?
3 or 4 right now, and then we had a few just resign.
Do you have any indication, I don't know if you can say, any indication from those who resigned or retired, what the reasons they gave? Was it related to that vote?
No, none of them gave that reason as being why they resigned, that it was due to the cuts.
Did you have an academy planned for February of this year, and then at that time, because of the TIF issues and the uncertainty in revenue, put it on hold because of the hiring freeze?
Yes, kind of, yes. That was, February, March is when we would normally start our hiring process and open it up. And then we'd normally run an academy around August or September. But due to things that were going on, we put that on hold. And now that a lot of things have passed and things have been resolved, we're looking at getting that going and starting one, March-ish.
Back to response times, how do you track response times? How often is a report available? Is that looked at annually, quarterly, monthly?
That's looked at monthly. We look at it every month, and I can pull it up anytime. It's within our computer-aided dispatching system. It tracks when we receive the call, when we dispatch the call, and when the first officer on scene arrives, and really every other officer after that. We track every time. It's time logged on every one of those. So
Response times have not lagged since,
no, there hasn't been a significant lag in any of our response times.
but there has been a lag?
Oh, I don't know. Just looking at it, there could be a few seconds here or there that's different, but nothing.
Chief, when you talk about misinformation being spread, what specifically are you talking about? What information? Where are you seeing it? Who's the source of the information?
Misinformation.
As far as response times, I've seen flyers and such that say, you risk not having a police officer come to your house when you need him, that kind of thing.
Well, I think that's just people speculating on, if you cut the force enough, things could happen. They're working a political side of this thing. I don't know. Whoever's putting them out there. And some of the things could, as far as response times, that's easy to see. We can produce that very easily.
Okay, specifically, there's a group, Unite Norman. They support police. They say they support police, but I see some of that information on their mailings about the police time
Right. It's like I said, it's something that I watch and I will watch, and if we get to being affected substantially, particularly on emergency calls, we will move more people back to patrol to try to bolster our response times.
They had mentioned that the city budget hasn't, or the police budget hasn't been cut. How do you feel about that?
I think what he's saying is the budget this year compared to the budget that was last year, we show an increase, and that's factual.
Do you feel like there's a little cut to what you're able to provide though?
We have had a cut of 9 police officer positions due to that cut of our budget. Each year, by contract that's negotiated, officers receive merit raises and different things that would increase our budget. And that's probably, and Anthony may speak better to this, but that's probably the majority of what our increase would be is in merit type raises and increases in pay and associated benefits. But due to the cuts, we weren't able to do that, so we ended up cutting positions. When Anthony asked me how we might do this or what I would like to look at, the advice I gave him when he was looking at it is, I don't want to have to fire people. So I had 7 empty positions at that time, and so we was using those. And then the plan was the manager would hopefully let me overhire by 2 because we cut 9 positions until we had attrition for those other 2 to leave. But those other 2 positions was vacated very quickly after that, so really we didn't even have to show an overhire at the 1st of July.
Chief Foster, have you ever had the city council in previous years seen them cut specifically from salaries and benefits before?
Not that I can remember. That might be a better call for Anthony.
Where do those cuts usually come from in the department?
There have been very few cuts to the police department budget specifically in prior years, and certainly none that I can remember that were targeted specifically to salary and benefits.
Chief, do you have any comment at all? I don't know if you comment on these types of things, this FOP lawsuit. Is that something that you heard, anything to say about?
I wouldn't want to comment about anything about that. It's pending litigation, and it's not my place to comment on it. Any other questions there?
Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your time helping us set the record straight and get some information out to the community at large. And we know that you have been wonderfully responsive in that respect, and we appreciate your time. You know where to find us. Mr. Anthony Francisco, our Finance Director, Chief Kevin Foster, myself, Daryl Pyle, always available to answer your questions as they may arise from today's meetings. If you have any follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to send them our way. We'll get those answers turned around to you as quickly as possible. So thank you for your time, and we're happy to stick around for a few minutes afterwards and deal with any follow-up questions. Thank you very much. You guys have a great day.